Nolan, there will be additional Batman movies.
Yeah,
Give it 3 or 4 years. And who knows? Nobody heard of Chris Nolan 10 years ago. And he is an extraordinarily gifted man, does everything well. So I kind of think this is the apex, but I'd sure love to be wrong, and I might very well be.
Well, there's one, one thing I've noticed. I've been working for the Wizard World convention chain, doing panels, brainstorming, organizing, and moderating panels. They're like a nationwide chain of comic conventions. And I've noticed I can have the same people on a panel, and if the word Batman is in the title, the attendance will be about 10 times what it is when the word Batman is not in the title. The exact same people on the day. So I think as long as things like that are true, those movies are going to keep going, because something about that brings people in.
Yeah, it'll really be interesting to see what they do with Superman. This last Superman movie was way darker than anything that had preceded it. That upset a lot of people. But
made a shitload of money.
And one of the reasons that Batman, I think, has become so popular is we are fascinated by evil. If you're a Jungian, we are fascinated by the dark projection of ourselves. But devils and demons and black-hearted villains have always been popular. So the genius of Maxwell Gibson, who created The Shadow, and Bill Finger, who created Batman, was to take that iconography, darkness, scallops, horns,
Dracula.
and then we are automatically fascinated by the iconography, and he said, this guy looks like a devil, but he's on your side. I think that's genius. That is really having your cake and eat it. Did that answer anybody's question?
That
What
was
am I
an
doing
awesome
here?
answer.
One more? Okay, one more.
Huntington?
All right, make it good, no pressure.
Danny, because of people see movies more, see the heroes more on screen, you think maybe they won't bother to pick up a comic book? They just want to just see it on television and just see it in the films?
Well, gee, are there any Time Warner executives in the audience? Show of hands, please. I have to be a little careful about answering that, but the reality is that Disney owns Marvel. I'm sorry, I don't know who's speaking, so I would like to make eye contact, but I can't.
The glare is...
Well,
Okay.
trust me, I would
Look in the general
if it were doable. But Disney owns Marvel, and a company that has historically been one of the great movie companies now officially owns DC. That's been true for a long time, but everything but the editorial department moved out to California last year.
And they're moving next year.
Yeah, they're on their way. So what the publishing companies are, I think, like I a little bit more than think, is R&D for the movie companies. I mean, there have been, somebody who works on the S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show said that there have been thousands of characters published by Marvel over the years. And they've got that whole big sandbox to play in, and pretty much the same, maybe even more true of DC, because it's been in existence much longer. So, and the woman who was hired to replace, I guess, Jeanette at DC, her background was the Harry Potter movies. And they've just hired a guy named David Goyer, who co-wrote some of Chris Nolan's work, to be the liaison between the comics and the film. So clearly, the movies are in the driver's seat. Well, one of the reasons that Batman is popular, or that he was probably always popular, but why the executives realized he was popular was when those things started making gobs of money. That's the world we live in. And it's always been true. Artists back to the 10th century have had to have patrons. So, as Danny said, the movies and the television shows reap the big bucks. It's in the natural course of things. You ask where the pulp magazines have gone. They went into comic books in about 1938. What happened to the great comics of our youth? They're now on the screen. I think there's room for both.
And I think the comics may not sell what they did in the 90s, but on the other hand, they weren't $4.99 each in the 90s, so you don't have to sell that many. You know, I got in the business in 1977, so I'm a new guy, Denny.
Yeah.
And
What's been 90 years?
Right, since the first day, there were people saying, "Oh, there's no point in publishing comics. You know, the intellectual property is what's valuable, and the media, and the Slurpee cups, and the movies." So maybe one day someone will decide that, but I think they're still profitable. It's still a viable business.
Yeah, taken all for all, figuring in the merchandising and
Merchandising.
Stan Lee. Stanley was a little naughty the week before last, but I don't think I'll tell that story. I mean, the point was somebody asked him if electronic comics were going to replace printed comics, and his answer, which might be accurate, was, no, people want something to hold in their hands. And the other thing about reading comics as opposed to experiencing these characters on the screen is you control the pacing, a very essential part of storytelling. You absorb the story at your own pace, whereas on the other media, it's a director who controls how you experience the tale they're telling. There is a lot of satisfaction in having that ability. There's also a lot of satisfaction in having to fill in some of the blanks yourself. You don't have the voice, so you have to imagine that. You have to imagine the stuff that happens between the panels. That engages you more deeply than anything that you just sit back and watch, no matter how good it is. So for that reason, I suspect comics are not on their last legs.
No, and the digital delivery of comics is a whole other thing that's, that's very robust. I don't want to say it with actual retailers here, and there is nothing like holding a actual printed comic, but that digital delivery, that instant gratification, humans tend to like that, also. So I think.
We in 1970 we thought we will all have to find a different way to make a living because comics cannot possibly last another 10 years. And then along came a guy from New Jersey named Phil Sully who had this wacky idea of selling them directly to the consumer and cutting out the middleman. The middleman was, well, the deal was that you were supposed to return what you didn't sell, but that was really expensive to do all that mailing. So they got down where you only had to return the logo of what you didn't sell. So all of a sudden, secondhand stores all over the world were having Batman minus the logo. Then somebody said, even that's too expensive. We'll just take your word for what you didn't sell. I mean, it was...
What could possibly go wrong with that system?
The conventional wisdom was if you want to sell 30,000 comics, you better print 100,000 because the waste was vast. And here comes nutsy old English teacher Suling who said, we can cut out those guys. He was a guy who had organized conventions, was an English teacher, and among the people he knew 100 people who would have to have every issue of Batman and every issue of Superman. So he made the deal with both companies. You give me X hundred a month, and it'll be up to me to sell them. And if I don't sell them, I take the loss. But there will be no returns. The only thing I ask is that I get to decide which comics you give me. So we will have a lot of Superman and Batman and Spider-Man. Maybe we will go a little light on Binky and his buddies, or Millie the Model. And that was the genesis of what was probably the salvation of comics as a mass medium. It has evolved and evolved and evolved.
The weird thing is, in comics is the only medium that seems to be true. Digital sales seem to stimulate print sales. They don't cut into them.
Is that right?
Yeah, because people, I guess, comic fans want the actual object. They may sample something online.
Also, if they're hobbyists, they want to
Right.
collect something.
Yeah, it's the only print medium that is stimulated by digital.
And when I was a kid, the world was full of slick magazines. Ladies' Home Journal, Collier's, Saturday Evening Post. These were big deals. And as television began to claim the leisure time of America's middle class, those dropped off one by one. Well, logically, comics would have gone with them. But comics found something that they didn't have. There was no direct sales for the Saturday Evening Post. So they survived as best they could for as long as they could. I think that Suling and Company really saved comics.
They created a new
There are
way to sell
now,
them.
comics have gotten to the point, they're like poetry a little bit. You can do a serious comic book. One of the best coming of age things I've ever read in any medium was Stuck Rubber Baby by Howard Cruz, about a gay guy coming of age in the pre-60s South. It's a wonderful book. It happens to be a comic book. So there would probably always be that form, that storytelling form, that language. But you wouldn't have anything like what the comic book situation today, where it's still something that engages a lot of people.
Oh, it's a golden age of variety. So, Rachel, I think you're trying to,
Well-
you're being far too polite.
Well, I can't thank you enough for such an insightful conversation, and if you're so willing to keep this night alive with us in the Sky Room, we would love to have our merch signed and keep the conversation going. And
To the Sky Room.
thank you so much, Danny and Denny. Oh, and Denny, did you want to say a few words about Hero Initiative before we went into the Sky Room?
Heroes Initiative is...
Stop, come back.
Wait, is it my breath? Is that what you... Heroes Initiative does something that nothing else does and something that needs doing. Comic book people have no safety nets, no unions, no pensions, no insurance plans, and everybody can have bad luck. So if you run into a medical bill you couldn't anticipate, or you're short on your mortgage, you apply to us. And if you've like worked in comics for 5 years, and you have the credentials, and you need a reasonable amount of money, we will give it to you. We get the money to give away by auctions and various deals. When I autograph in 5 minutes, I will have a little jar next to my pens, and anybody that would like to put $1 or so in the jar, it'll be in Jim McLaughlin's hands by Friday, and you may buy groceries for a 100 kid next month. So that's what we will be doing.
I'm not as good a person as Danny. I'll be selling my books and keeping the money.